Hello and welcome to Study History with Mr. P and my topic talk about the Montgomery Bus Boycott. So the Montgomery Bus Boycott is one of the most famous events from the Civil Rights era. So the story begins on the 1st of December 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. Rosa Parks got on a bus to go home after work. Montgomery buses were segregated and she sat in the first row of seats marked for coloured people. During the journey, the driver asked Rosa Parks and three other black people to then move when the bus filled up and a white person was left standing. The others moved, Rosa Parks refused to do so and she was arrested. Now, refusal to move itself was not uncommon and the drivers had a system for dealing with this. But what happened after Rosa Parks was arrested was not normal. There was a bus boycott. It started as a one-day boycott on the 5th of December, but lasted 381 days. It only ended when buses were desegregated. So through my topic talk, I'm going to go through the causes of the boycott with you before moving on to the events and the outcomes of the boycott. So the arrest of Rosa Parks itself was the immediate cause, the trigger, but there were a number of longer-term causes as well. So segregation on buses itself was a cause. So buses were segregated, black people sat at the back, white people sat at the front with sections labelled white and coloured, and appeals to the bus companies to make changes had been ignored. And the bus drivers themselves were part of the issue. The white bus drivers were a problem in Montgomery. They bullied black passengers, especially women. They were also quick to call the police if a black passenger refused to move for a white passenger. This was also a suitable place for a boycott because there were several active civil rights groups in Montgomery. These included local groups as well as the NAACP, so there was already an awareness of the need to fight for civil rights, and a structure was in place to allow for quick and efficient campaigns. But factors went beyond this, one of which was the fact that Rosa Parks was a suitable figurehead. So Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to give up her seat, but she was a respectable married black woman who was well regarded in her local community. She was part of the local NAACP, she was its secretary in fact, and had been trained in how to behave in non-violent protests. So whilst the arrest sparked off the protest, we can see that there were a number of other causes too. So through the WPC and other civil rights groups in Montgomery, there'd already been a focus on bus reforms in Montgomery to try and change the issues of drivers and dealing with empty seats. But appeals to the bus company had been ignored, so there'd already been warnings then of a bus boycott. So then steps in the Montgomery Improvement Association, which was set up on the 5th of December, which was the day of the original boycott. Its aim was to improve the lives of black people and to continue the boycott to then press for improvements. From the formation of this association, Martin Luther King emerged as the leader of the boycott, chosen for his background and skills, and he became the face and the voice of the campaign. So at the start of the boycott itself, members of the MIA, the Montgomery Improvement Association, met with bus company officials who refused to make changes. The MIA then organised carpools to help people get to work. Boycotters faced the inconvenience to their daily lives, as well as violence, harassment, and even some people lost their jobs. During the boycott, there was also extreme reactions by some white people. This included bombing churches and King's Home, so with firebombs. Sympathetic publicity, though, for the campaign due to the violence against them, compared to the boycott policy of non-violent direct action, certainly helped their cause. But there was a wide range of opposition by white people, the Ku Klux Klan, the WCC, and bus companies themselves. During their campaign, MIA members were arrested. 89 were arrested on the 22nd of February alone and put on trial. In February 1956, the NAACP lawyers filed the Browder v. Gale Supreme Court case. And then on the 5th of June, the Supreme Court said buses should be desegregated. But this wasn't the end of the matter, because the bus companies made several appeals, each of which were rejected. Then on the 20th of December, the boycott stopped, so 381 days after the first day of it. And on the 21st of December, integrated bus services started. Now, there were a number of factors or reasons why this boycott was successful. Organisation certainly played a key part. So the groups involved worked well together. The Montgomery Improvement Association kept people informed. Events and actions were well publicised and things were well coordinated. So this ties in then with publicity. So from day one, people were kept well informed with leaflets in church and through the local press. Actions like carpools were published, and the extreme actions by white people, such as firebombings, increased publicity for the case. Bringing in key figures like King, who also ended up on trial as well, also increased the publicity. And this ties together really with the commitment of the people involved. So despite threats, despite losing jobs, despite going to jail, despite the bombings, the boycotters persisted. In addition, existing groups in Montgomery, like the WPC, used their contacts to keep the case going. And perhaps one thing that's seen as tying this all together is the leadership of King. His education, his non-violent approach, his passionate speeches, his devotion to civil rights and Christian values were very important. King had massive appeal. He kept the boycotters going, obviously not single-handedly, but he's seen as the figurehead of keeping boycotters going. He helped to raise funds and got publicity for the boycott. So in addition to King, other key characters were important as well, including Joanne Robinson, the president of the WPC. She'd led a campaign about problems on the buses and was one of those who suggested the initial one-day boycott and the flyers for it. Edie Dixon of the NAACP had been campaigning for civil rights in Montgomery for years before the boycott. It was in fact Nixon who called Parks after her arrest, helped set up the boycott, went on fundraising tours and was well respected. So although he was overshadowed by King, actually he played a role in events in Montgomery much longer than King had. And Ralph David Abernathy too, a clergyman who worked with King, often providing the organisation to back up King's calls for action. So this boycott was really important in a number of ways. It showed that black people could organise mass resistance and that civil rights campaigns could attract widespread support if they were well organised and publicised. In turn, publicity brought injustices to light and sparked off other boycotts. It was also this campaign that really brought Martin Luther King into the spotlight and led also to the rules of non-violent direct action being laid out. So what happened after the boycott? Well, the boycott achieved its aims, but the white backlash continued. This included firebombing attacks and shots being fired at black people on buses. On the 9th of September 1957, a Civil Rights Act was passed, despite opposition from Dixiecrats in Congress. This was seen as an outcome of the Brown case and the bus boycott. It said the federal government would get involved in civil rights issues. And lastly, the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Council. This was formed in January 1957. It aimed to coordinate church-based protests across the South. They would use mass action and non-violent direct action to reject and protest against segregation. Their first focus came to be voter registration. So that gives you, I think, a detailed overview of the key events of the bus boycott, as well as its causes, its outcomes and key people involved. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. Please take the time to check out others that I've uploaded too.